After months of struggles, San Diego's largest hospice organization is closing its doors. I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a look at what will happen next for hospice patients. And there's a possible roadblock for pension reform in San Diego. And police say the manhunt for Christopher Dorner is over, even though they're not sure they have his body.
Each of these proposals deserves a vote in Congress. If you want to vote no, that's your choice. But these proposals deserve a vote.
President Obama challenges Congress to take action on gun control while laying out an ambitious agenda for the start of his second term. I'm Amita Sharma. We'll have Republican and Democratic reactions to last night's State of the Union address. And a big crowd gathers to tell federal regulators what they think about restarting the San Onofre nuclear plant. We'll have firsthand accounts of what happened.
Plus, we'll give you an up-close look at a collection that's a science fiction lover's dream. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
San Diego Hospice says it'll shut down operations in the next 60 to 90 days. The closure is prompted by a 2-year Medicare investigation looking into the eligibility of many of its patients. KPBS investigations producer Joanne Farian has been following the hospice's struggles. She joins us from the newsroom. Joanne, what happened?
Well, it all started with the Medicare audit 2 years ago. Medicare has been looking into whether all of San Diego Hospice's patients were eligible for care. Did they, in fact, have a terminal illness, meaning did they have less than 6 months to live? If the audit finds that patients were not eligible, San Diego Hospice could have to pay back the money they received for that patient. They'd have to pay it back to Medicare.
Now, why do they have to shut down operations?
Well, it comes down to money and uncertainty. The head of San Diego Hospice, Kathleen Pecura, says they did their own analysis and estimated they could owe Medicare tens of millions of dollars. But the problem is they don't really know because Medicare has left them in the dark all this time. Pecura says they couldn't continue operating without knowing the results of the audit. I should also tell you Scripps Healthcare, one of the largest nonprofit healthcare providers in the county, has moved in and they are now working with San Diego Hospice. Their hope is that patients and some employees will now transfer to Scripps. I spoke with both the head of San Diego Hospice, Kathleen Pecura, and the head of Scripps, Chris Van Gorder, earlier today about the move.
In our circumstance, the lack of interaction and information has truly caused us to be in the situation we're facing today.
What we'll be doing over the next 30, 60, 90 days, based upon what the court allows us to do, is seamlessly transfer the patients to our care unless they want to opt out. They have the option, of course, of going to any other hospice if that's what they'd like to do.
Now, Joanne, you mentioned that some San Diego Hospice employees might be hired by Scripps. Do you know how many?
At this point, we don't know. There are currently 500 employees, 400 patients at San Diego Hospice. Chris Van Gorder says the number of employees they hire will largely depend on the number of patients that transfer over to Scripps.
KPBS investigations producer Joanne Farian. You can find out a lot more about this story at kpbs.org/endoflife. Police say the manhunt for Christopher Dorner is over, even though they're not certain that they've recovered his remains. A coroner is examining the body found in a burned-out home where police believe Dorner made his last stand yesterday, staging a gunfight with officers before tear gas was fired into the building. The home caught fire after that. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department says the fire was not started intentionally. Dorner was wanted in 3 murders in Irvine and in Riverside. Police say he wanted revenge for his firing from the Los Angeles Police Department. The gunfight took a 4th life. A San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputy was shot and killed. Earlier today, Thousands of people lined the streets of Riverside, and hundreds of officers from many police forces gathered to honor another officer killed during Dorner's alleged rampage. Michael Crane was an 11-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department who was also a Camp Pendleton Marine. He was married with 2 children. Governor Jerry Brown and State Attorney General Kamala Harris were among those who attended today's service. Supporters of San Diego's pension reform initiative may have suffered a legal setback, with the state agency ruling that San Diego violated the law while working on pension reform. But they say they are not backing down. KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr joins us from the News Center. Katie, tell us about the most recent legal decision in the pension reform case.
Eric, an administrative law judge with the state's Public Employment Relations Board, or PERB, has ruled San Diego leaders should have negotiated with labor unions on eliminating pensions before taking the issue to the ballot. They didn't because then Mayor Jerry Sanders said he'd be backing a ballot initiative to get the measure to a vote as a private citizen and not as the mayor, which he said meant he didn't have to consult the unions. PERB ultimately disagreed with that.
Now, the city attorney has been handling this issue at PERB and in the courts. What was his reaction?
City Attorney Jan Goldsmith says this ruling changes nothing and that he will not back down in trying to get pension reform approved. He says the issue was brought to the vote through a citizens' initiative process, which is protected through the state constitution. He said the city largely expected this ruling from PERB, which he claims is biased toward labor unions. In fact, he tried to bypass the PERB process altogether, but a court ordered the city to go through it. So now San Diego must go to a PERB review panel, and it can then go to the courts. Goldsmith says in the meantime, the city can continue to implement the voter-approved switch to 401ks for most new city employees.
KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr. Thanks, Katie. Home prices in Southern California surged in January when compared to prices a year ago. The average price hit $323,000 last month. That's an increase of 23.5% over the same time a year ago. Cash buyers accounted for about a third of all transactions. More than 16,000 homes changed hands. That's the largest January tally of home sales since 2007. Now, only 15% of all sales involve foreclosed properties, and that is down sharply from more than half of all sales involving foreclosures 4 years ago. A couple of city council members are speaking up in defense of San Diego's economic development zones. California Governor Jerry Brown announced new rules last month that would shrink the size of the zones and the kinds of benefits offered. Kevin Faulkner and Mark Kersey say the zones fuel economic development, and Kersey says the focus should be on jobs.
Helping our local businesses survive and thrive is critical to the health of our economy. Making jobs available for veterans and those in the low-income brackets is a priority for all of us. Changes to the Enterprise Zone program should be focused on creating jobs, not balancing Sacramento's budget. Thank you.
He says the governor shouldn't be messing with a program that works. Backers of the idea say the state should be looking to expand and not restrict the economic development zones. During his State of the Union address last night, the president called on Congress to reignite the middle class through tax reform and job creation, and to give gun violence victims what they deserve, a vote on tighter gun rules. Amitha Sharma talks to local party leaders about the address at the roundtable.
President Barack Obama laid out a packed to-do list for his second term during his State of the Union address last night. Joining me to get into the nitty-gritty of the president's agenda are Ron Nearing, vice chairman of the San Diego County Republican Party, and Francine Busby, chairwoman of the local Democratic Party. Ron, last time you were here, you faulted President Obama for not focusing on jobs and the economy in his inaugural address last month. Last night, he talked about reinvesting in the country's infrastructure, in reinvesting in research and development, in creating a network of manufacturing hubs. How did those ideas go over with you?
Well, I think it's good that the president is talking about these things, but that's how the president leads. He talks. He doesn't lead by actually doing things that are constructive. And I heard a lot last night about more cylinders, more investment in government-directed industrial policy, which has been a failure everywhere in the world that it's been tried. What we don't hear from the president are the type of things that will really improve America's competitiveness. He said nothing about the job dampening effects that his Obamacare health care legislation is doing, the fact that he continues to push for higher taxes on the people who create the most jobs in this country, increasing taxes on small businesses and the like. Those are very dangerous signals for the economy. So it's one thing to talk about the economy, it's another thing to have the right ideas, and he didn't have the right ideas last night.
Francine, on to gun control. Handguns are responsible for most of the firearms deaths in this country, and yet there is nothing in President Obama's gun reform package that tightens restrictions on handguns. Why?
Well, this is the first time we've heard a conversation on any kind of arms control, arms regulation, safety, arms safety in this country in decades. And he knows that it's going to take time to inch toward reforms that need to be addressed. So I think he's starting with reforms that make sense, that most people in the country agree with, which is the background checks for everyone, and then take it one step at a time.
Ron, there was an emotional moment in the chamber last night when President Obama spoke of his gun reform proposal, which includes universal background checks, a limit on magazines, and renewing the assault weapons ban. He also talked about the need for a vote. Here's a clip from him.
Each of these proposals deserves a vote in Congress. If you want to vote no, that's your choice. But these proposals deserve a vote.
Ron, do you think these proposals deserve a vote?
Well, I would love to see President Obama telling the Democratic-controlled Senate that the jobs bills that the House of Representatives have reported out, that the Republicans have taken the lead on, that they deserve a vote. So if the president were as interested in about actually helping the economy as he is in getting political advantage on this issue right now, then that rhetoric should be both-sided. I don't know when this bill is going to come up for a vote. I think this is a matter of the legislative process working itself through. This is why we have a legislative process. This is why we don't have a dictatorship, because presidents don't show up in Congress and tell Congress what to do. And if they do, maybe they should focus on both sides of the Capitol as well.
Francine, speaking of the legislative process, there seems to be a lot of bipartisanship on the issue of immigration reform, where Democrats and Republicans are concerned. How do you harness this bipartisanship and allow it to spill over into other areas?
You know, I think part of the problem is sort of like we just saw right now. You asked, will Congress pass a bill on these gun control issues that the president is proposing that are modest, one step at a time? And we changed the topic to the Senate. We need to have the entire Congress, the Senate and the House, focused on working together. Clearly, the Republicans have a very political reason for wanting immigration control or immigration reform to pass. The Democrats have been promoting this, talking about this for years. The president is committed to doing this. Get him a bill and he will sign it. So if everyone is willing to get this thing done, this immigration reform, something everyone agrees to, they've got to get it through the Republican House that has an intransigent minority that will not agree to anything.
Ron, the president talked about increasing the minimum wage to $9 per hour by 2015. Here's a little bit of what he said.
In fact, working folks shouldn't have to wait year after year for the minimum wage to go up, while CEO pay has never been higher.
Do you agree?
The biggest challenge facing our economy right now and getting people back to work is not raising the minimum wage. We know the Democrats push a minimum wage hike because so many of their union friends have contracts where wages are tied to whatever the minimum wage is plus a certain amount. The president is playing politics with this. If he were serious about jobs, we'd move forward on the Republican jobs bills that have already passed in the House.
Ron Nearing, Francine Busby, we have to close it there. Thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you for having us.
Pope Benedict XVI celebrated his final Mass as pontiff today. Thousands packed St. Peter's Basilica for the Ash Wednesday Mass. And Benedict asked them for prayers. He is leaving the papacy at the end of the month for health reasons, the first pope to resign in nearly 600 years. A big crowd in Orange County last night for a public meeting on the San Onofre nuclear plant. It's been shut down for more than a year. Last night's meeting was held by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Amitha Sharma has more.
More than 1,000 people attended the sometimes fiery meeting about restarting the plant. KPBS's North County Bureau Chief Allison St. John was there. She joins me now, along with Kendra Ulrich of the environmental group Friends of the Earth. We should say that we asked Southern California Edison to come on the program. The company did not respond. Allison, what happened at last night's meeting?
Well, last night was an opportunity for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to bring the public up to speed about their investigation of Edison and San Onofre and the procedure, really, that they're going through before making a decision whether to allow Edison to restart again at 70% power, to restart Unit 2. So they went through, quite a bit of what has happened in the past, and they said that at this point they still have some very important questions that they want Edison to respond to before they will make a decision. And one of the most important is, would it be possible for the plant to operate safely at 100% power? Because their license requires that. So there was that question, and the other question was whether the change in the design, the different support structures of the tubes, those tubes that rattled and got damaged, whether that constituted a design change or not. So Edison didn't actually say anything except to respond to questions at the meeting. The meeting was entirely a panel of NRC people talking about their procedure.
Kendra, Edison says that its global experts say that this reactor, Unit 2, is safe to restart at 70%. How does the NRC verify that, and how secure do you feel with that process?
Well, really the core of this issue is the fact that independent experts have not been given the opportunity to review that. However, our independent experts, Arnie Gunderson of Fairwinds Associates and John Large of Large Associates, have reviewed the data that they have submitted, and there are significant questions here as to whether or not the plan is safe to restart. Now, one of the big things that the public should be aware of is that there was a lot of contention among the experts as to, what caused these issues and how best to address them. For example, this was brought up in the public meeting that was just held in Rockville, Maryland, and one of the commissioners asked about this, about the fact that there seemed to be disagreement among the experts that Edison submitted as a part of the assessments to support the restart plan, that appeared not to agree. So there's still a lot of questions here, and questions that the public has a right to have answered through a public, transparent process.
And Allison, cities appear to agree on their concerns on whether this plant should restart. Last night, San Diego Mayor Bob Filner sent a representative to the meeting. What did he say?
Yes, well, the representative was Rob Wilder, who is the mayor's public advocate for energy and sustainability. He was one of just about half a dozen elected officials, including one from Los Angeles. But here is what here's an example of what the letter from Mayor Bob Filner said.
The restart of Unit 2, even at reduced power, is a dangerous experiment that threatens the safety of 8.2 million Southern California 8.2 million Southern California residents living within a 50-mile radius, including much of San Diego.
So he pointed out that if there was a restart, it should be taken in the context of what about alternatives, and he put a completely different spin really on this whole issue of how to decide whether to restart the plant. But he was not the only elected official there, but he was one of, basically we should say that there were no elected officials who appeared to say that they supported the restart.
Kendra, for the past week we've been talking about this leaked report that California Senator Barbara Boxer referred to last week, that she says shows that Edison knew that there were problems with these steam generators even before they installed them. Did that come up last night?
It was brought up by the public. The public were asking for the information in that report. This was not something that was on the agenda for this meeting, which is very significant because this is an issue that obviously is at the forefront of whether or not Edison can be trusted to restart these reactors safely. The public has a right to know what's in that report, and certainly the letter from Senator Boxer and from Congressman Markey raises some very serious questions as to what they actually did and what safety issues they were willing to accept in order to avoid this proper license amendment process.
Allison, very quickly, this report remains under wraps, right?
It does, and it's interesting because these meetings are designed to make the public feel included. I should mention there were a lot of union members there who did support the restart, but although the meeting was packed, the fact is that most people wanted to see a document that the NRC is refusing to reveal.
Allison St. John, Kendra Oldroyd, thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next NewsHour reaction to the President's State of the Union address and his push for immigration reform. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
As the song famously points out, a kiss is just a kiss, except when it's 25 feet tall. San Diego's permanent version of what's known as the Kiss statue has been bolted to a pedestal on the downtown waterfront. Now, the statue's official name is Unconditional Surrender, and it represents an iconic moment at the end of World War II. It's going to be dedicated on Saturday morning, and couples who got married during World War II are being invited to come to that dedication ceremony to renew their wedding vows. It will be a good day to be out on the waterfront on Saturday. The warming trend continues along the coast. Temperatures reaching 80 degrees by Friday. And expect plenty of sun inland as well. Cooler temperatures expected in the mountains, rain by Friday there, and clear blue skies expected in the desert. One of the world's most impressive collections of science fiction is now in the hands of the San Diego State University Library. It is just part of the literary wealth of an SDSU graduate who's begun to donate his collection to his alma mater. Edward Marsh is also a follower of the Church of Scientology. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone visited his Escondido home to find out what else he's collected.
No one enters Ron's room without signing the guest book.
Ron is L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of the controversial Church of Scientology and the central figure in Edward Marsh's multi-million-dollar science fiction collection.
Come right in.
Marsh keeps his collection here in what he calls the Marsh Library. It's a standalone building on his gated estate. Down the hall from Ron's room is the Golden Age of Science Fiction room. Here, Marsh has the complete signed works of authors like H.G. Wells, Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, and Jules Verne.
These are all signed editions. I'm very proud of them.
Marsh has already given a rare Jules Verne novel to SDSU.
They have a book there now. There are only 2 copies known to exist. A Chinaman's Adventures. Phenomenal. Yeah, Julie Verne.
Marsh is 61 and retired from the real estate business. He's spent over 30 years building his collection of books, letters, pulp magazines, and film scripts. An initial appraisal puts the collection's worth at between $10 and $15 million. Marsh commissioned gold busts of many of the authors in his collection.
Its purpose is to keep out the bugs, the sunlight, and the dust.
He keeps each book in its own handcrafted, gold-embossed preservation box. There are hundreds of them.
I'm a snob. I actually don't read books that are not signed by author. But if you can't handle it, you can't enjoy it, why should you even have it? Eh?
The library is climate controlled. Marsh is a heavy smoker, but he uses smokeless cigarettes in the library and on airplanes.
The only way to fly.
Marsh admires each of the 50-some authors in his collection.
He was a sailor.
But his reverence for L. Ron Hubbard goes back to age 17, when Marsh joined the Church of Scientology. Marsh grew up in La Mesa. His dad was a well-to-do attorney, and his mother a socialite. They were skeptical of his newfound faith.
But when I told him it got me off the drugs I had been taking, and he went, oh my God. And Mom said, see, Ed, I told you. My father's name is Ed also. I said, yes, I know. I fibbed to you all these years. I'm sorry.
Today, Marsh has reached the highest levels of the church, which means he's paid for thousands of what the church calls auditing sessions, similar to counseling sessions.
As a young man, I was very troubled, extremely troubled. Today, I haven't an unhealthy care in the world.
It's almost an understatement to say Hubbard and the Church of Scientology are controversial. Both have been the subject of investigations and negative press going back to the 1950s.
We're about to enter what I call Ron's room, the L. Ron Hubbard room.
It was L. Ron Hubbard that inspired Marsh to begin collecting. Hubbard was a prolific science fiction writer, but it's his nonfiction work that is most well known, specifically the book Dianetics, in which Hubbard outlined the self-improvement techniques that form the basis of Scientology.
This, for example, is just one set of the Scientology books.
Also in Ron's room, a collection of e-meters dating back to the 1950s. Those are machines used in Scientology's auditing sessions to measure emotional states. The technology is similar to lie detectors.
If you look closely here, you'll see a needle. The needle moves when it's all in operation. And there are 28 different needle characteristics of an e-meter. One, for example, goes like this. That means I want out of here. I want out. Or I am out. My body's still here.
Marsh is still deciding where the remainder of his collection will go, but SDSU and the Church of Scientology are likely candidates.
Cyclo pants.
The recent gift to San Diego State, worth $2.5 million, includes signed works by Ray Bradbury, George Orwell, and of course L. Ron Hubbard. In the meantime, Marsh is going to keep building his collection. There are still hundreds of boxes in his garage to sort through.
The collection is a big thing to me, though. It's been my hobby horse for 10 years, since I've had any money. And I've plowed it into paying off the mortgage and investing it in preserving what I consider to be important things.
Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Recapping tonight's top stories, San Diego Hospice is closing. Hospice officials say they'll transfer operations to Scripps Health. San Diego Hospice has been under a Medicare audit for 2 years. It's cut workers and its patient count, and last week it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. And the sheriff in San Bernardino County says the manhunt for Christopher Dorner is over, even though police aren't sure they've recovered his body. A coroner is examining remains from a burned-out home in Big Bear, the scene of a gunfight that police say was Dorner's last stand. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.